The conference room was packed, not with the usual polished crowd of DC insiders in tailored suits and scripted smiles, but with young firebrands, restless journalists, and political strategists watching every move. The energy in the air was volatile. America was tired of the same rehearsed promises, the same diplomatic doublespeak. Enter Karoline Leavitt. She didn't walk in, she stormed in. Her white blazer caught the room's light as if announcing her presence before her voice even had the chance. She skipped the handshakes. She wasn't here to charm. She was here to challenge. And everyone knew it. On the opposite side of the room stood Nikki Haley. Calm, poised, and backed by decades of political refinement. She offered a tight smile, her signature composure intact. She knew this was coming. She just hadn't expected it to happen on this stage. Karoline stepped up to the podium, eyes locked on Haley like a hawk preparing to strike. No preamble. No filter, just fire. "Let's be honest with the American people for once," she said, voice sharp as a blade. "We're done with polished politics. You've spent your career packaging messages like shampoo commercials. It's not leadership, it's branding. And that era ends today." The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in silent approval. Nikki Haley held her ground, blinking slowly, searching for the precise words that wouldn't make her seem rattled. But Karoline was already rolling. "You say the right things, Nikki. But the world doesn't need more perfectly crafted statements. We need conviction, courage, and a spine that doesn't bend when globalists call." Haley raised an eyebrow. "Conviction without diplomacy is chaos, Karoline. You're playing with matches in a room full of gas. Better than watching the house burn from a distance and calling it leadership," Karoline fired back. A low murmur spread across the room. The air got heavier. This wasn't just a debate, it was a reckoning. And it had just begun. The moderator, a well-meaning political correspondent from a mainstream network, cleared his throat nervously, gripping his notes like a life raft in turbulent seas. "Let's pivot to foreign policy," he said, attempting to restore balance to the chaos unfolding. Too late. Karoline turned slightly, still locked in with Haley. "Foreign policy? You mean the part where we send billions overseas while veterans sleep under bridges here at home?" Her voice was ice-cold, deliberate. "You wore heels into war zones and called it strength. I call it photo ops wrapped in patriotic wallpaper." Gasps broke through the crowd like static. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in a little closer. Haley inhaled sharply. Her voice, calm but tense, sliced through the air. "Karoline, what you call photo ops were missions to promote American diplomacy, to strengthen alliances. To build a resume," Karoline interrupted. "Let's not pretend otherwise." A flicker of irritation passed over Haley's face. For the first time, the polish cracked. Karoline took a half-step forward. "You stood by as endless wars drained this country. You signed the party line like it was scripture, and now you want to lecture us about principles?" The room fell into stunned silence. No buzz. No whispers. Just a heavy realization that something unscripted, something real, was unfolding. Haley straightened her spine. "You have no idea what leadership under fire looks like." "Oh, I know exactly what it should look like," Karoline shot back. "It's not about memorizing talking points in a think tank's green room. It's about standing in the gap when everyone else hides behind press releases." Flashbulbs lit up the stage like an artillery barrage. Reporters were already texting headlines. "Leavitt goes nuclear on Haley. The GOP's generational civil war, live." But Karoline wasn't done. She turned to the audience now. "We have been spoon-fed the same safe, scripted version of conservatism for decades, and where has that left us? Bloated spending, open borders, cultural decay, and a party too scared to fight back." She pointed, not at Haley, but at everything she represented. "We don't need more ambassadors. We need warriors." A roar burst from the audience. Some booed. Some stood to clap. But no one was neutral. The aftershocks of Karoline's words pulsed through the venue. In the press box, reporters scrambled to rewrite their narratives. What was supposed to be a formal conversation between two Republican figures had just turned into a televised insurrection, and Haley was in its crosshairs. Haley adjusted her mic, her composure slipping just a fraction. "The only reason you're standing there," she said sharply, "is because women like me broke down barriers before you even knew what politics was." Karoline didn't flinch. "You broke barriers, yes, but then you built velvet ropes around them." The audience rippled with murmurs. Karoline paced once across the stage like a fighter sizing up her opponent. "You talk about opportunity like it's a ladder," she continued, "but you pulled it up after you climbed. You joined the machine. You wore the labels. You shook the hands, and now you want to talk legacy?" Haley stiffened. "I served this country overseas. I've negotiated at the UN. You spoke to tyrants in air-conditioned rooms and called it diplomacy," Karoline cut in. "But at home, our cities are overrun, our kids are lost, and our values are under siege." She paused just long enough to let that settle. Where were those negotiation skills when our borders were being erased? Haley leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "You don't understand geopolitics. You're a commentator with no record." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "My record? I've spent my entire career saying what no one else dares say. You had decades to lead. And what do we have to show for it? Broken trust. Hollow speeches. Endless wars. A party more afraid of CNN than of losing the country." A few older attendees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But younger voters, the ones with phones raised and eyes wide, were eating up every word. Karoline stepped toward the front of the stage, lowering her voice to just above a whisper. "Respect is earned, not inherited. Not bought with book deals and primetime interviews." She turned back to Haley. "You had your shot. Now it's our turn." And with that, Karoline dropped the mic, figuratively, not literally. But the effect was the same, and Nikki Haley was reeling. Haley glanced to the moderator, but his expression was that of a man watching history unfold and praying not to be in its path. There would be no lifelines, no interruptions. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was an ideological showdown. Nikki squared her shoulders and fired back, her voice gaining heat. "You act like fury is strategy, Karoline. But America doesn't need flamethrowers, it needs diplomats who can lead on the world stage." Karoline didn't blink. "Diplomats? You mean the ones who sent pallets of cash to regimes that hate us? The ones who shook hands while they stabbed us in the back?" A wave of gasps swept through the hall. "This is why people don't trust politics anymore," she continued. "Because for every crisis, the response is the same: focus groups, tweets, and nothing." Haley stepped in fast. "That's not leadership, that's just noise." Karoline smiled tightly. "Then I suggest you cover your ears." The tension was so thick it felt physical, like a rope tightening between the two women on stage. And everyone watching, in the room and across the country, knew what was really happening here. This wasn't just about policy, this was about a generational transfer of power. Karoline represented something raw, unfiltered, and deeply unsettling to the establishment, a younger generation of conservatives who didn't want to play the game, they wanted to burn the rulebook. "We've tried polished," she said, her voice dropping just slightly. "We've tried the practiced smiles, the acceptable speeches, the media-approved soundbites. Where has it gotten us? A country on the brink." Haley responded coldly, "And what would you replace it with? Screaming matches on primetime? Angry tweets? Conspiracy and chaos?" Karoline stepped forward again, calm but fierce. "No, I'd replace it with truth. With fire. With people who love this country more than they love being liked." A loud, involuntary "yes" erupted from someone in the back. It spread. Cheering. Booing. Applause. Shouts. The room had lost control, not because it was chaotic, but because it had just been unleashed. The moderator finally stood, attempting to transition. Ladies, let's move to closing statements. Already did, Karoline said, walking off stage, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Haley remained at the podium, blinking against the spotlight. And across every screen in America, a message had just been sent. Backstage, the hum of production lights and hurried footsteps filled the air, but Karoline stood still, centered, silent. Staffers scrambled, journalists whispered into microphones, but none dared interrupt her. She just detonated a political moment that would be replayed for days, maybe weeks. She adjusted her white blazer, the edges sharp like her words. Her phone vibrated with alerts, tweets, texts, calls from campaign staffers and supporters. A few said, "Too far." Most said, "It's about time." On stage, Haley remained seated, giving her own post-debate spin to a handful of reporters, but her answers were measured, even defensive, a far cry from her usual practiced ease. She repeated familiar lines about experience, diplomacy, and tone. But no one was quoting her. All eyes were on Karoline. A camera crew caught up with her as she stepped outside, where a crowd had gathered beyond the metal barricades. Flashbulbs sparked. Supporters chanted her name. Detractors screamed at her from behind signs. It didn't matter. The attention wasn't split, it was magnetized. "Karoline," a young woman shouted from the crowd. "That was fire." Karoline offered a nod, her expression calm, but her heart pounding. A reporter rushed up. "Karoline, some say your confrontation was disrespectful to a woman who served the country for decades." She cut in, unwavering. "I respect service. What I don't respect is silence when it matters. Glossed over truths. Priorities that leave Americans behind." Another reporter pressed, "Do you think this split the Republican Party?" Karoline looked directly into the camera. "No. I think it revealed it." The moment aired within minutes. Clips went viral. TikToks were already remixing her quotes with music drops. Some networks slammed her as reckless. Others hailed her as fearless. But everyone, left, right, and center, agreed on one thing. She was impossible to ignore. In her hotel room later that night, she sat alone, replaying the footage. Not to admire it, but to analyze it. To study every word, every pause. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated storm, and it was just the beginning. Because in Karoline's mind, this wasn't just about Nikki Haley. It was about reclaiming a movement. By morning, Karoline's name had flooded every news ticker and talk show panel. Clips of her takedown played on loop, dubbed everything from raw honesty to a nuclear-level PR stunt. The country was divided, but nobody was indifferent. Her team met her in the hotel suite just after sunrise, some buzzing with energy, others wide-eyed with concern. "We've got 7 interview requests from conservative outlets," one staffer said. 4 from mainstream ones too, added another. "Even The View wants you." Karoline smirked. "Let them wait." She walked past them toward the window. Down below, a crowd had already gathered outside the building, waving flags and holding handmade signs. One simply read, "She said what we've been thinking." But not everyone was cheering. A headline flashed across her phone from a major outlet. "Leavitt's rage, is this the new face of conservatism or a dangerous step too far?" She took a breath. The pushback was expected, welcomed, even. Because for Karoline, this wasn't about approval. It was about ignition. Later that afternoon, Haley appeared on a news network for her first full post-debate interview. She spoke calmly, controlled as always. "Look, I get it," she said. "Karoline represents a new wave. But politics isn't about volume, it's about vision." Karoline watched from backstage at a town hall event, her expression unreadable. Then the host leaned in. "She called you part of the problem, Nikki. Too polished. Too establishment." Haley's smile thinned. "And I say it's easy to shout when you've never had to lead." That was it. Karoline turned to her aide. "Book a camera. Now, now." Moments later, she was live on social media, in a single take, unscripted, unfiltered. Polished leadership gave us endless wars, broken borders, and gaslighting press briefings. I'm not running to look good in a blazer. I'm running because the country is suffocating under the weight of polite failure. Within an hour, the clip had over 2 million views. Support poured in. So did vitriol. And somewhere in between, influence was shifting. Because Karoline wasn't just fighting Nikki Haley anymore. She was challenging a generation, and reshaping a party in real time. That evening, the two women were booked at the same major political summit, different panels, but the same city, same air, same spotlight. A collision was inevitable. Backstage, aides moved like chess pieces. Haley's team reviewed talking points. Karoline's team didn't bother. Her message was already locked, not in a binder, but in her bones. Outside, reporters whispered. "This isn't a party rift. It's a generational mutiny." Haley took the stage first. As always, she opened with grace, polished, poignant, full of diplomatic soundbites about unity and leadership. The audience nodded, even applauded. Then came Karoline. She didn't wait for applause. She didn't pause for effect. "I was told to tone it down," she began. "Told that politics is a place for control, for smiles, for making friends on both sides of the aisle. But if both sides are failing America, then why would I shake their hands?" There was silence, sharp and immediate. The crowd froze between admiration and alarm. "This isn't about generational disrespect," she continued. "This is about responsibility. And I don't care how many countries you've visited or speeches you've rehearsed, if you've been standing in power while this country crumbled, you don't get a medal. You get a mirror." A gasp. Then cheers. Then more gasps. Backstage, Haley folded her arms. "She doesn't understand diplomacy," she said to a staffer. "She just knows how to detonate." But her words felt hollow. Because out there, in the roar of a crowd divided and electrified, a truth was rising. Karoline wasn't just riding a wave. She was becoming the wave. That night, headlines didn't ask if she had changed the conversation. They asked, how long until she changes everything else? By the following morning, even Karoline's critics couldn't deny it, she had become the story. Political talk shows across the spectrum dissected every word of her summit speech. Some painted her as reckless, others as revolutionary. But no one called her irrelevant. Haley's camp scrambled to regain footing. They released a carefully worded statement. "While we appreciate the passion of new voices, leadership is measured by results, not volume." Karoline didn't respond with a press release. She responded with a camera. Standing alone in front of an American flag, she looked straight into the lens. "They say I'm loud. Maybe. But so is an alarm when something's burning down. You want calm speeches? Find someone who thinks this system is working. I don't." The video racked up 5 million views in under 2 hours. Political influencers clipped her quote and ran with it. Memes exploded across social media. Young conservatives printed the line on t-shirts overnight. She was no longer being introduced to audiences. She was being quoted. Later that day, Haley appeared on a major network again. This time, the tone had changed. The host leaned in, the question sharper. "Governor, has Karoline Leavitt essentially redefined the GOP's messaging?" Haley's jaw tensed. "Look, I admire her energy, but experience matters. This job isn't just about social media clips, it's about diplomacy, alliances, actual governance. So you think she's unfit?" "I think she's not ready." That soundbite was everywhere within minutes. And Karoline? She didn't wait to react. At a town hall later that night, she faced the crowd with the same fire. I might not be what the system is used to, but maybe that's exactly the problem. They say I'm not ready. Good. I'm not ready to bow down to the way things have always been. The room erupted. No more was this a side story or a flash in the pan. This was a reckoning. And everyone in D.C., including Haley, could feel the tremors. Because Karoline wasn't chasing relevance anymore. She was rewriting the definition. The pressure inside Haley's campaign HQ was beginning to show. Staffers bickered over messaging. Donors quietly asked for reassurance. And behind closed doors, strategists debated a question no one would have dared whisper 6 months ago. What if Leavitt wins? Meanwhile, Karoline had shifted gears. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was setting the agenda. She launched a nationwide, unfiltered America tour, drawing packed crowds in cities Haley's team hadn't bothered visiting. Rust Belt towns. Forgotten farm communities. Suburbs sick of soft answers. At every stop, she repeated the same message. This isn't about me. This is about waking up a generation that was told to sit down and behave. We're not doing that anymore. In Iowa, she walked straight into a firestorm when a local reporter asked, "Isn't all this too divisive?" She didn't blink. What's divisive is pretending things are fine when they're not. Truth divides, but it also frees. The clip went viral. Again. Meanwhile, Haley tried to pivot. She gave a well-scripted interview with a morning show, trying to reframe herself as the experienced realist. But the hosts pressed her. "Governor, do you think Karoline Leavitt's momentum is a fluke?" Haley smiled tightly. "I think it's a moment. And moments pass." But by now, the moment had evolved into a movement. One that didn't care about resumes or war rooms, only results. And behind the scenes, Haley's advisors warned her. Ignore her, and she controls the narrative. Engage her, and you legitimize her. She had no good option. Backstage at a political gala, someone asked Karoline how she planned to keep this momentum. She laughed. "I'm not here to keep momentum. I'm here to burn down the playbook." One strategist watching from the crowd muttered under his breath. "She just might." The final showdown came during a nationally televised town hall, hosted in a packed university auditorium with millions watching live. The format was simple: 2 candidates. 1 stage. No handlers. No edits. Just questions and answers, and the truth in between. Nikki Haley walked in steady, measured, wrapped in the poise of decades in politics. Karoline entered moments later, sharp, unblinking, her steps echoing like a drumline. The moderator wasted no time. "Ms. Leavitt, you've said politics needs disruption. Governor Haley says it needs stability. Which is it?" Karoline leaned forward. "It's easy to talk about stability when you've been part of the system that's failing people. I'm not here to decorate a broken house. I'm here to gut it and rebuild it with Americans in charge." The audience roared. Haley responded with surgical precision. That kind of rhetoric may fire up social media, but it doesn't negotiate peace, balance budgets, or manage crises. Neither do carefully worded statements, Karoline shot back. People are tired of polished speeches. They want someone who speaks their language, not someone who filters truth through political consultants. A hush fell. The moderator turned to Haley. "Governor, do you think Karoline is dangerous for the party?" She hesitated, just a second too long. "I think she's reckless." Karoline smiled. "And I think you're scared." Gasps. Laughter. Then thunderous applause. That night, headlines screamed across every platform. Reckless or revolutionary? Leavitt doesn't flinch, and doesn't fold. Haley versus Leavitt wasn't a debate. It was a transfer of power. Backstage, as lights dimmed and microphones cooled, Karoline stood alone for a moment. No crowd, no noise. Just the weight of what she'd built. A reporter approached, hesitant. "What's next?" She didn't look away. "Whatever they say I can't do. That's what's next." And just like that, she turned and walked into the future, not waiting for permission. So, what does it take to shake the foundations of power? Not just experience. Not just charisma. But the courage to speak when silence is expected, and to stand firm when the room turns cold. Karoline Leavitt didn't enter this arena to make friends. She came to flip the table. In an age of political choreography, she chose chaos with purpose. In a sea of rehearsed answers, she gave raw truths. And when the old guard tried to dismiss her, she didn't ask for their seat, she built her own platform. Tonight wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a signal: the ground beneath the establishment is cracking. And like it or not, a new voice is rising, sharp, unfiltered, and unapologetically American. Stay tuned. This isn't over.